Changing key in music is probably one of the most effective ways to keep a listener's attention. But if not done correctly, your music just won't sound right. So I'm going to show you a beginner-friendly method to change your key smoothly. And then I'll show you how to use the circle of fifths to aid you in this process. But first, I want you to listen to this section of Chopin's Fourth Ballad. While listening to this, your ears are never desensitized because he's continuously shifting key, keeping things interesting. But these key changes are done carefully in order to create a smooth listening experience. But what happens if we change key with little planning? Well, the key change becomes obvious and may sound something like this. Now that piece is not inherently bad, and I'm not just saying that because I wrote it. But the change of key from C major to this interesting D flat major 7th harmony is pretty drastic. So let me play back just the first notes of each measure, just so you can hear the harmonies of this piece. You'll notice that the shift from C major to D flat major 7 is a fairly obvious transition. And the reason for this is because these harmonies don't share many similar notes in a scale. And one way for me to prove this to you is by layering the harmonies of C major and D flat major 7. So you can clearly see the C major harmony stacked with D flat major 7 harmony. But how does this sound? Let's take a listen. Since we're playing two very different harmonies at once, the music not only becomes dissonant, but it also becomes jarring. Let's look at another example of abrupt key changing in an orchestral work. This beautiful piece by Izaak is called Lurking, and we'll be modulating from C major to A flat major. So this key change is not bad at all, and in the right context, it can really grab someone's attention, such as in this case. But the fact remains that changing keys from C major to A flat major without any smooth modulations in between can sometimes make a piece sound abrupt. And the reason for this is because the C major scale and the A flat major scale only share 3 similar notes. And a final example of abrupt key changing can be found in this stunning fugue by Henry. There's a section where Henry modulates from F minor to C minor, and this change is the most obvious change in my example so far. But I do want to point out that this was a conscious decision made by Henry. All examples in this video are being done with Music Jotter. And when you compose with Music Jotter, you can temporarily change your key by adding accidentals to your notes. And when doing so, the rest of your notes will remain in that key, making the composition process smooth. Also, you may have noticed that when I stacked the C major and D flat major 7 harmonies for this demonstration, I used 2 voices. And I actually custom spaced these voices for demonstration purposes. So to all the teachers out there, I just want you to know that Music Jotter is an excellent teaching aid. And I actually use it all the time in my YouTube videos. So if you would like to see this technology developed to its full potential, don't forget to like this video and to subscribe. I'll also put links to my Buy Me a Coffee donations page where you can get early access to the software. So now that you understand abrupt key changing, I can now talk to you about smooth key changing, which is the focus of the rest of this video. So I'm going to talk to you about a very fun, simple, and practical method to change your key using the relative major and minor scales. But in order to understand what a key in music is, we must understand what a scale is first. So a scale is a series of notes that create a unique pattern. And as a composer, you're free to define your own scales and patterns. But the important thing is that each note between your scale is called an interval. For example, by definition, the pentatonic scale will have just 5 intervals. The major pentatonic scale consists of 3 whole steps and a minor third, and the minor pentatonic scale consists of 2 whole steps and 2 minor thirds. So to see this scale put to practical use, Henry's fugue that I demonstrated earlier actually makes use of the pentatonic scale. So let's see how that sounds. You can clearly hear the distinctive 5-note pattern. So when we limit our harmony to these 5 notes, it's actually impossible to write music that's dissonant. And this is why this scale is used in a lot of folk music all over the world. Let's talk about the diatonic scale. This is your traditional scale used in Western music that contains 7 intervals. So if we just use all the white keys on a piano, we have a C major scale from notes C through C due to this pattern of whole steps and half steps. So if we change this pattern slightly, we change the key from C major to C minor. But these key signatures are somewhat different because they share just 4 of the same notes. So a key change from C major to C minor could be somewhat abrupt. But for the sake of this video, I want an easy key change. So how would this be done? The smoothest way to achieve a key change is actually by staying in key. So when we shift from major to minor using the same exact key signature, this is called its relative minor. So let's say we're in the key of C major. C major's relative minor is A minor because both of these keys use the same exact notes of the diatonic scale. And to make this transition, all you have to do is shift up by 5 intervals. And in doing so, we can smoothly change from C major to A minor. So if you want to convert back to C major smoothly, you just reverse this process by shifting downwards by 5 intervals. Or you can go upwards by 2 intervals. And this is now a transition from A minor to its relative major, which is C major. So if you take a look at the circle of fifths chart, you're going to see this clearly. You also know that you're using the relative major or minor when you don't introduce any accidentals into your notes. So let me now show you how to switch between C minor's relative major. I want C minor, so it appears that we have 3 flats that make up this key. And this chart tells us that if we start with C and run up the scale, we'll be playing the C minor key. So let's see what that looks like. As long as I start on C, you can clearly hear the minor scale. But if we take a look at the circle of fifths chart, we're also going to see the E flat major key as well, and it shares the same 3 flats. This means that if we run up the scale starting with E flat, we're now in E flat major. So let me show you that now by starting on the E flat key. So take notice how we're using the same exact note still, and that these notes don't have any accidentals, such as flats, naturals, or sharps. So we can change key very smoothly just by doing nothing. Start with C for the C minor scale, and then in order to transition to the relative major, just start with E flat. So now let's do a short composition composing in C minor and E flat major with very little thought. Now I want to do another minor to major key transition. So if we look at the circle of fifths, let's now search for F minor. It's going to show us that we need 4 flats this time. So let's change the key signature first. So if we start on the F key and play up the scale, we're going to be in the key of F minor. And by the way, in Music Jotter, I put a little indicator at the top right just to show you what note corresponds to which key. If you don't have the circle of fifths handy and you're in F minor, just go up 2 intervals to switch to its relative major. 2 up from F is A flat major. So now that I'm in A flat, if I want to hit the relative minor, you either go back 2 intervals or up 5 intervals. And either way, we're going to end up back to F minor. So let's do a short composition changing between F minor and A flat major now. Let's say we want to break out of the key completely. One trick is to pick a key on the circle of fifths that's next to the key that you're currently in. So if we're in F minor, let's choose C minor. So I'm going to choose 3 flats. So if you listen to the transition from F minor to C minor, you're hardly going to notice any difference due to how similar these key signatures are. And the fun thing is that once we're in C minor, we can now modulate to C minor's relative major without any issues, which is now E flat major. So we can compose an F minor and A flat major, and then change the key to C minor, and then from there we can compose in C minor and E flat major. And now all we have to do is repeat this process. I wanted to go over at least one original work that makes use of more advanced key changing techniques where the modulations are smooth. So I'm going to play through part of this piece by Johan, which he called Minuet Scherzando. So you're going to notice right away that we start off in C minor, and then we quickly modulate to G major. So if you recall, C minor has 3 flats, and G major actually has 1 sharp. But here's a big reason why this modulation is so smooth. So I've spoken to you about the natural C minor scale, but C minor also has a melodic scale, which has just an E flat, and then we make A and B natural. So here's what this new scale sounds like. Now I'm going to put in the G major key signature. So if we take a look at our circle of fifths, we see we have just one sharp. So if I start at G and climb up the scale, we're going to have the G major scale. Now while I play the G major scale, you're going to notice that the first 5 notes of this scale actually overlap the C minor melodic scale perfectly. So this is a big reason why this modulation works so well. The next modulation is from C minor to A flat major, and the reason this works out so well is because these keys are next to each other on the circle of fifths. Now for this next modulation, we have an A flat 7, which is nearly identical to A flat major, but with a stacked minor third. And we're modulating to D flat major, which is right next to A flat major on the circle of fifths. So that's why this modulation is smooth. At this section here, we smoothly transition from C minor to A flat major. This modulation here is interesting because we're modulating from A flat major to C sharp minor. And the major version of C sharp minor is actually D flat major. And D flat major is next to A flat major on the circle of fifths. So A flat major to C sharp minor has the potential to be a smooth key change in a certain context. I'd like to point out this interesting modulation. We're in the key of B flat major, but this is actually a B flat 7 chord, which contains a minor third. Then we modulate to B major, which is transposed just a half step up. But the minor third note from the previous key in B flat happens to belong to the B major scale, and this is why this modulation is really nice. Changing key is critical to keeping your audience engaged. It really all comes down to how many notes the harmonies of each key share with each other. The less notes they share in common, the more obvious the change will be. So if you found this key changing tutorial helpful, you should definitely check out this video next, which goes over the time signature in just 15 minutes. See you next time.